The Masque of Mandragora, the first serial of Doctor Who's 14th season, first broadcast in 4 parts from the 4th to the 25th of September 1976. Now, this is one thing to mention is this is the first story that introduces the new control room. Like, at the very start of the story, the Doctor and Sarah Jane are exploring the TARDIS, and they come across a new control room, a secondary control room, which the Doctor says, well, I can just as easily steer the TARDIS from here as I can from the main control room, and it's nice. This is also, I think, the first kind of TARDIS control room that does actually have something of a personality. I mean, the others are great, but you can definitely tell they're mostly poured from the same mould. But this one, with its kind of dark gothic atmosphere and its elements of wood, it definitely has a bit more personality to it. While the new Doctor TARDISes in the new era of Doctor Who definitely had kind of more personality, the ones in the original series, they tended to mostly be quite similar. This is the first one that I do think definitely stands out from the rest. Anyway, while piloting in this new control room, they end up accidentally entering the Mandragora Helix, an element of space which is quite beautiful to look at. But they manage to quickly escape, but are followed by elements of Helix energy, or a kind of creature made up of Helix energy which stores aboard the TARDIS. Managing to escape from the Mandragora Helix, they land in San Martino, Italy, around the 15th century, so around the time just before the Renaissance. Now, in San Martino, in the small town they end up in, a man named Giuliano is about to ascend to become the new Count of San Martino, and the kind of new leader. He's played by Gareth Armstrong, and he's mostly trying to do good. I mean, he's gathering together for a party a group of people, some of the best minds in Italy, including Leonardo da Vinci, to try and kind of bring some new light to the new age. However, he's got a bit of a problem in that his uncle, Count Federico, played by John Warrimore, is trying to seize power for himself, and he's mainly doing this by manipulating an astronomer named Hieronymus, played by Norman Jones, trying to say, well, just predict that he is going to have a tragic accident next week, then he'll lock himself away in his palace, and then I can kill him in peace. It's like he doesn't really believe in the astrology stuff, but he mainly wants to kind of manipulate Hieronymus so that he can get away with doing bad things. Meanwhile, Hieronymus himself is actually part of a mysterious cult known as the Brethren of Demnos. The Brethren of Demnos, at the start, they're mostly kind of harmless. They're mainly doing these demonic kind of rituals just to kind of try and seize power, but at first they're kind of seen as fairly harmless. That is, until the Helix energy comes in and possesses Hieronymus, telling him that it can give him tremendous power. And from then on, the Doctor and Sarah Jane have to find some way to stop him, even though it does prove more difficult than they thought, especially when Hieronymus briefly ends up hypnotizing Sarah Jane to try and get her to kill the Doctor. Anyway, other people who they encounter is kind of Giuliano's second-in-command, a close friend named Marco, played by Tim Pickett-Smith, who definitely is trying to do good things, but is often caught up in the crossfire, and a captain named Rossini, played by Anthony Garrick, who is very much on Federico's side. He's mainly doing it for kind of the power and just to show that he's all-powerful and that people must obey him. And I will admit, it does do fairly well. I will admit this isn't necessarily my favourite story. I mean, it's definitely kind of lower stakes compared to some of the other ones, and I will admit the ending does get a little bit confusing. Like, sorry, spoiler alert if you don't want any particular spoilers for this particular story, Federico, when he ends up finding that Hieronymus has been lying to him and is leader of the Brethren of Demnos, he kind of goes forward to strike him, only to find that Hieronymus is now kind of a faceless being, who subsequently electrocutes him, and Federico is reduced to ashes. And I will admit, the kind of ending, I did find it a little bit confusing when the Doctor somehow manages to defeat Hieronymus off-screen, and then manages to trick the other members of the Brethren into gathering round and electrocuting themselves to death. I did find that was a little dark, and I did find some of the Doctor's humour a little bit morbid, but at the same time, it's got a nice atmosphere, and I do think that for Doctor Who not to have yet been to the Renaissance, it is a nice thing to see, and you can definitely see the kind of roots of it as everyone kind of explains concepts that, while are commonplace today, that would become much bigger then. Stuff like how the Earth is actually round. But it is nice. While there apparently was more common knowledge around the time of the 15th century, it is kind of nice to see them go from the grassroots, working things out. So overall, I don't know if the Masque of Mandragora is necessarily the strongest serial of Doctor Who, but it is one that I'm glad I saw, and it was technically the last one I needed to see for Elizabeth Sladen and Sarah Jane Smith. I've now seen every story that included her. And you know what? It's nice to complete that. In terms of actual ranking, I did do a ranking on my social media, but I think, personally, I would rank Genesis of the Daleks as the best for the weakest. I'd probably say something like Death of the Daleks, because I felt that was really underwhelming. But anyway, that's just me. Anyway, the next classic story that I'm hopefully going to be reviewing soon is The Face of Evil. And that's the last one I need to complete Season 14. Till then, see ya.